Three relatively recent news items are circulating throughout the social media that are related to India-China relationship. First, China has introduced Mandarin names of several towns in Arunachal Pradesh located at the northeastern extremities of India. Second, US Congress has passed an act recognizing McMohan Line is the real boundary between India and China. Third, India is being offered NATO membership. The question is, are these news items linked to each other? Without any shred of doubt, they are closely linked. In fact, all these news items have been discussed in the US Senate, and the US government has expressed their strong support favoring India and in a calculated manner antagonize China. No spatial inquiry is needed to understand that US concern over China's naming of cities in Indian territory and their recognition of McMohan Line as the final demarcation line between India and China and their unsolicited support for India is most definitely not because of any concern of India's territorial integrity. US is motivated by the same sinister warmongering agenda that has slid Ukraine to its death and destruction, and profiteering of US military-industrial complex. This diabolical plot, concocted by the US and its NATO allies, is eliciting their bestial grin, as stated by the Kremlin spokesperson, Mr. Peskov. Before dealing with the matter of whether India is interested in joining NATO, let's first deal with the issue of why US and their allies want India to join NATO. It is interesting that Western media has launched a hysterical propaganda on Finland joining NATO as 31st member. It is also being claimed this membership will significantly increase NATO's strength and double Russia's border with NATO. With so much confidence on their newly acquired strength by including 5.5 million Finns, why bother to consider a third world developing country like India to join force? In this context, few relevant points are to be considered. Some well-concealed facts must be presented here that mainstream media of the West or even that of India never ever made public. But these facts are crucial to understand the strength and weaknesses of the USA and their NATO allies. That in turn will explain why West is and will continue to scramble to get India on board as a NATO member. First, according to the great Norwegian sociologist Johan Galtung, the founder of Peace Research Institute of Norway, after the Civil War in 1865, USA has never won any war. Facts are, USA joined Second World War in August 1944, only 9 months before Germany surrendered to Russia in May 1945. Russia single-handedly defeated Hitler's Nazi troop, starting from their first defeat in Stalingrad. 30 million lives were lost in Russia. In comparison, the US troops joined the war just 9 months before and lost about 300,000 casualties. Another partner of US in that war was UK. The strength of their armed forces was 6 million. Of that, 2.5 million were recruited from India and other South Asian countries. In addition, armament industries in India and foodstuff for the British armed forces came from India. Effect of that war procurement left 5 million Bengalis starved to death. Official Indian sources never ever made India's contribution in the last war public for whatever reason. Why UK and the West hushed up India's contribution in defeating Germany is understandable. But Indian government, since transfer of power, never disclosed such facts to the public, obviously to avoid any assault on the credit and prestige of Anglo-American West, to whom the Indian ruling class remained loyal. Second, based on personal experience, I can vouch that West European countries have developed a strong anti-war culture. For instance, a Norwegian family feels embarrassed if any of their family members are enrolled as a commissioned officer, which implies they are trained to kill and murder human beings, which they think is not something to be proud of. In some of the West European countries, toy guns, etc., are disbanded from kindergarten and public schools. War culture and violence, unlike in the US, society is not respected at all in most of the NATO countries. This anti-war culture is not conducive for facing conflict. Also, according to a recent report, the US Army faces great difficulty in recruiting soldiers in the armed forces. These examples, anecdotal it may be, indicate how the general population are averse to warmongering, which is engineered by the international military-industrial complex. NATO is aware of their poor fighting quality, which explains why they have not sent any troop to face direct confrontation in the Ukraine conflict. Hitler himself was known to have made numerous contemptible comments on the poor fighting qualities of USA and the West, whom German troops overran in a matter of weeks. Third, membership of NATO and its associated so-called security is linked to several obligations that are binding to the members. Now that warmongering politics in US, in the interest of profiteering of their military-industrial complex, may drag China into potential conflict. USA and NATO are in no position to combat China. One must remember the greatest empire during the contemporary history was that of British Empire. Without India, there could never have been any empire, any victory over two world wars, and never any affluence and prosperity of collective West. Today, also, there cannot and will not be any empire without subjugation of India's natural and human resources. At the looming prospect of a conflict with China, if India can be incorporated into NATO and her border skirmishes with China can be provoked further, only then Ukraine-like border conflict between India and China can work to the advantage of US and collective West, where China can be fought to the last Indian. This is essentially the game plan. Nationalist Indians may think their leaders are products of 10,000 years of civilization, history, and culture, and are too intelligent to be tricked into NATO membership. So far, NATO seems to be designed to intimidate, exploit, and militarily assault small and weak countries. Examples are Serbia, Syria, Libya, Afghanistan, Yemen, etc. These countries suffered assault under the pretext of protecting freedom, democracy, and human rights. Looks like these city-state members of NATO have been dragged into a conflict with an adversary like Russia. It is truly incredible that these so-called leaders of NATO could be so naive to so grossly underestimate the military capability of Russia and are now stuck into a quagmire. Looking at Finland as their savior in case of further escalation is not really a sign of statesmanship. In US and NATO countries, common people have absolutely no bearing on the decision to be made by the government leaders. What do the citizens of India think about joining NATO? India, no exception either. However, most definitely, India doesn't need NATO. She has some technological means and enormous human and natural resources of her own to resist any onslaught from any quarter. Whereas judicious use of technology and resources are essential elements of national strength of any given nation, but their political leadership is the decisive factor in determining how and whether such resources are used in the interest of nation building or allowed to be drained out to enrich a privileged class. A nation that is committed to put its natural resources to good use by shaping its human resources through indigenous schooling and create a disciplined workforce requires the right kind of leadership. Such a leadership is not in sight in India as of now. India's membership will enormously strengthen NATO and will become a serious threat to both Russia and China. It will also allow Indian oligarchs to enrich themselves far more than they already are, but will pave the way for a dangerous confrontation with China and/or Russia. Common people of India, the workers and peasants, will gain absolutely nothing. Instead, will have to stare vacantly at the prospect of being vaporized in a nuclear confrontation. Horrifying prospect is Indian ruling class has a long tradition of betraying their own people to protect the interest of Western invaders. Indian army has never fought to make India independent, but fought many wars to keep Indians subservient. Contemporary India directly inherits the entire government system from British Raj, meticulously designed to protect interest of the West, or Anglo-American West to be precise. Indian society is an open and free playground for church-controlled Western media, Western-financed NGOs, education system scavenging of Western leftovers, system designed to delink Indians from India. Once in 5 years, people may change ruling parties, but not the policies. Western blocs, by design, celebrate this as largest democracy, finds no fault with human rights and freedom. Why not? What really meant is it is America's freedom, democracy, and human rights in India, not that of Indians. There is a simple, bloodless, and peaceful solution to all the conflicts the world is involved in, and that is let China and Russia wake up one fine morning and allow Anglo-American West to open millions and millions of English medium schools, allow churches to enter in and open business of converting locals into Western version of Christianity, allow Anglo-American print and electronic media to spew venom against Marx and Engels and everything Russian and Chinese. Make sure that 99% of graduates from Chinese and Russian schools and universities are not employable in their own countries. Make sure all Chinese and Russians are trained to ape Anglo-American language, literature, history, tradition, culture with contempt of everything indigenous. Above all, Russian and Chinese youth have adopted mindset to passionately advertise in the matrimonial market to get convent-educated Anglophonic pride. Unemployment skyrockets, no subsidized healthcare and schooling, no utilities, no infrastructure. Just a few years of such practices and both countries are bound to experience degradation of human resources, lose their well-earned grudging respect, and deflate their acquired power to challenge the West. Degradation of Chinese and Russian human resource, which is the dream of Anglo-American West, may lead to cessation of all hostilities towards China and Russia, followed by inevitable installation of Western democracy, freedom, and human rights that caters to USA and its allies. What about China and Russia? They will have to slide back to the fate of the present-day Third World. Thus, no one must worry about nuclear wars. Only now and then, NATO and their allies will bomb countries here and there to maintain democracy, freedom, and human rights, and of course, peace. What happens to the common people world over? They do not exist in the thoughts of peacekeepers. It is by no means any exaggeration to state this is what world politics and economics is all about. If you like what you see and hear, please subscribe and ring the bell.